Chapter 25. The Triumph of Henpecked Hoe. You who know so much more about the world than does number 10 Ox will have already figured out 6 or 7 different ways to escape from that place, and if you will bear the momentary indignity of imagining that you are soldiers in the service of the Duke of Qin, we will see if any of your methods is similar to that of Li Kao. Very well. You are soldiers who have been forced to stand guard in a loathsome torture chamber deep in the bowels of the earth, where slimy green water drips from black stone walls, and sickly white cockroaches crawl through puddles of blood, and fetid, feverish odors mingle with the stench of discarded intestines and eyeballs. A horrible scream splits the air. The key rabbit topples over in a dead faint, and you follow the executioner into an adjoining dungeon, where a ghastly spectacle greets your bulging eyes. An elderly gentleman of scholarly mien lurches in lunatic circles at the end of a leg chain, frantically clawing at his throat. His face and hands are covered with loathsome black splotches, and his blotched black tongue protrudes most unpleasantly, and black saliva spurts and dribbles from his blotched lips. His eyes roll up until only the whites are visible, and he does an acrobatic somersault and lands upon his back. His hands spastically pound the floor. He bounces rigidly up and down, jerks, twitches, spurts more saliva, and finally comes to a rest, as stiff as a board. Another gentleman, who is even more ancient, and who is wrapped in so many chains that he can't move, views the scene with eyes that bulge in terror and screams, "The cockroaches! For the love of Buddha, look at the cockroaches!" The black wine, called Wu Fan, is invisible upon a black stone floor, and you cannot possibly see that the pounding hands of the deceased scholar have uncovered a trail of it, and that the trail leads to large invisible ideographs that are traced upon a black stone wall. What you do see is that 10,000 repulsive white cockroaches are scrambling frantically across the floor, dashing up the wall, and writhing in artistic patterns upon thick, sweet, invisible lines that spell out the following message from the Board of Health: "Run for your lives. It is the plague of the 10,000 pestilential putrescences." I sincerely doubt that you will stand there and make learned comments concerning the calligraphy of insects. It was all up to Henpecked Hoe, and his timing couldn't have been better. The executioner turned and fled. Hoe jerked his leg chain taut, and the executioner tripped and fell to the floor, where he was pounded into jelly by the feet of the fleeing soldiers, who dashed back into the torture chamber, scooped up the key rabbit, who had just regained his consciousness and his feet, and carried him up the stairs like a minnow riding the crest of a tidal wave. "Run for your lives!" they screamed. "It is the plague of 10,000 pestilential putrescences!" The pounding feet and shrieking voices faded away, and Henpecked Hoe collected the keys from the flattened form of the executioner. His eyes were worried as he unlocked his leg chain and started to work on ours. "Do you think I overdid the saliva?" he asked in a small voice. "It was perfect," I said. "Do you really think so? I was afraid that the final spurt and dribble might appear to be in poor taste." "When you do it again, don't change a single spurt or dribble," Master Li said firmly. The last chain fell away, and it felt marvelous to stand up and stretch my limbs. We walked into the torture chamber and collected weapons. Li Kao filled his belt with daggers, and I took a sword and a spear. Henpecked Hoe had his heart set on the monstrous axe that was used for decapitation, but since he was quite incapable of lifting it, he was forced to settle for a small double-bladed model. Li Kao started leisurely for the stairs. "There is no hurry," he explained. "The soldiers from the torture chamber will have collected the soldiers on the landings, and by the time they burst into the palace, they will have become a large screaming mob. Anyone who isn't trampled flat will dash into the courtyard, where they will collect a couple of divisions from the army of the Ancestress, and when they hit the wall, I doubt that a stone will remain standing. They will then collect the army of the Duke of Qin and bolt hysterically through the city and reduce it to rubble, and the citizens who survive will follow in their wake. It is quite possible that we will have to walk to Hangzhou before we see another living soul." There was a flaw in his reasoning. We climbed the stairs and saw nothing but a few flattened bodies, but when we stepped through the floor to the throne room, we ran right into a creature who would not have blinked an eye if the South China Sea had suddenly turned into soy sauce. A bloated figure with a crown on her head leveled a finger like a sausage. "There is no such thing as the plague of the 10,000 pestilential putrescences," the ancestress snarled. "Soldiers, chop these dogs to pieces." Her bodyguard closed in on all sides, and we would have been killed instantly if it hadn't been for Henpecked Ho. He whooped with joy and charged straight towards the throne, and his axe was whirling so swiftly above his head that if he had spurted a little flame and smoke, he would have resembled the bamboo dragonfly. "Chop, chop!" he howled happily. "Chop, chop, 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 chop!" Of course, he ran right into the spears of the soldiers. We gave him up for dead, but the distraction allowed us to clear a path. Li Kao filled the air with flying daggers, and 4 soldiers fell. "Quick, Master Li, climb upon my back," I yelled. He hopped up, and I raced straight toward the throne, planted the butt of my spear, vaulted over the head of the ancestress, and took to my heels. It was a losing game. The soldiers knew the palace, and we did not, and sooner or later we were going to reach a dead end. I raced up staircases while Li Kao snatched vases from pedestals and smashed them over the heads of the soldiers below, but there were simply too many soldiers. I ran down a long hallway and tugged at a pair of massive bronze doors. They were locked. I turned and started back and skidded to a halt as the hallway filled with soldiers. 2 columns of men started towards us along the walls, while the captain of the bodyguards led a double rank down the center. We stared at a solid line of glittering spears, and I consigned my humble soul to the august personage of Jade. Then an elephant charged into the hall and squashed the captain flat. At least I thought it was an elephant until I realized that it was the ancestress, and I gaped at an incredible sight. "Chop, chop!" yelled Henpecked Ho. "Chop, chop, 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 chop!" He had no right to be alive. Blood spurted from 20 wounds with every step that he took, but he kept right on taking them. "Save me!" the ancestress howled, and then her 500 pounds flattened 3 more soldiers who might have saved her. It was over in a few minutes. The ancestress ran around in circles and squashed everything in front of her, and Henpecked Ho swung his axe and whacked everything in sight, and Li Kao slipped through the carnage, slitting throats, and I flailed away with my sword. Toward the end, it became rather messy, because we were slipping and sliding upon pieces of the ancestress, and there was a lot of ancestress to go around. Then we staggered away from the last fallen soldier and knelt beside Henpecked Ho. He lay on his back, with his axe still clutched in his hands. His life was draining away in red rivulets, and his face was ashen, and his eyes strained to focus on us. "Did I get her?" he whispered. "Ho, you chopped that monster into 100 pieces," Master Li said proudly. "I'm so happy," the gentle scholar whispered. "Now my ancestors will not be ashamed to greet me when I arrive in hell to be judged." "Bright Star will be waiting for you," I said. Oh no, that would be far too much to ask," he said seriously. "The most that I dare ask of the Yama kings is that I may be reborn as a beautiful flower, so that sometime, somewhere, a dancing girl might choose to pluck me and wear me in her hair." I blinked through my tears, and he patted my hand. "Do not weep for me, number 10 Ox. I have grown so weary of this life, and I long to return to the great wheel of transmigrations." His voice was very faint, and I leaned down to hear his last words. "Immortality is only for the gods," he whispered. "I wonder how they can stand it." His eyes closed, and the axe fell to the floor, and the soul of Henpecked Ho took leave of his body. We carried him outside to the garden. It was cold and overcast, and a tiny silver rain pattered down as I dug the grave. We gently placed the body into the hole, and I recovered it with earth, and then we knelt and clapped our hands. "Henpecked Ho, great is your joy," said Master Li. "Now your soul has been released from the prison of your body, and you are being greeted with great honors in hell. You have rid the world of a woman who was an abomination to men and gods alike, and surely the Yama kings will allow you to see Bright Star again. When it is time for you to be reborn, your wish will be granted, and you will become a beautiful flower that a dancing girl will wear in her hair." "Henpecked Ho," I sniffled through my tears, "I will miss you, but I know that we will meet again. Master Li will be a three-toed sloth, and Miser Shen will be a tree, and you will be a flower, and I will be a cloud, and someday we will come together in a beautiful garden. Probably very soon," I added. We said the prayers and sacrificed, and Li Kao stood up and stretched wearily. "Immortality is only for the gods. I wonder how they can stand it," he said thoughtfully. "Ox, the last words of Henpecked Ho may be significant in more ways than one." Master Li stood lost in thought for a moment. Then he said, "If I were to try to count the incredible coincidences of our quest on my fingers, I would wind up with 10 badly strained digits, and I am far too old to believe in coincidences. We are being led towards something, and I strongly suspect that Henpecked Ho has also supplied the question that we must ask before we continue the quest. Only the wisest man in the world could answer it, and can it be a coincidence that we happen to know where to find the wisest man in the world?" I stared at him stupidly. "Miser Shen," he explained. "Ox, it was no accident that Miser Shen told us that when he was trying to bring his little girl back to life, he learned that the wisest man in the world lives in a cave at the end of Bear's Path, high in the Omai Mountains." "Are we going to the Omai Mountains?" I asked. "We are indeed, and we will begin by looting this palace. The old man of the mountain," said Master Li, "does not sell his secrets cheaply." Rain still fell, but one corner of the sky was turning blue, and as a final tribute to Henpecked Ho, I shoveled the largest pieces of the ancestress into a wheelbarrow, and trundled them to the kennels and fed them to the dogs. In the distance a rainbow formed.